Hi everyone, today our topic is the Interquartile Range, or IQR. You do not need to write down everything we'll cover in this video, but be sure to jot down important information and at least one example of each type of problem that we'll cover. Also remember that you can pause the video to jot down important notes, rewind to view information again, and fast forward if you think you got it. But make sure you don't fast forward so much that you miss out on something important. So as a review, the median divided our data into two different parts because it's the middle. The interquartile range, or IQR, is basically built on that same concept. So we had crossed out the same amount in the front and the back in order to get to the middle, to find the median. The quartiles will divide the data into four parts. So instead of 50% in the front and 50% in the back, the four parts will divide the data into 25%. So we have 25% here, 25% here, 25% here, and 25% here. And you're basically finding the median, and then you're doing it again for both of those halves. So once we found the median, we would now look at the information, the data, as two different halves, and it's like we're finding the median for the first part and then the median for the second part, so that we end up with three different medians, which will divide our data into four parts. The interquartile range, or IQR, is what we call the inside two quartiles, or inner 50%. So you have four different parts that you're dividing it into. The IQR is actually just the inside. So that's going from quartile 1 to quartile 3. That's what we call the interquartile range. And range is normally a subtraction. You're trying to figure out the biggest number minus the smallest number, how spread out they are. So again, each of the pieces, the four pieces, is called a quartile. Quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3, and quartile 4. But IQR is just the highlighted part here, the inside 50%, the inside two quartiles. And that's the subtraction of them. Be sure that you have written down this stuff before we move on. All right, so another kind of graphic for you to understand what's going on. So here's our information, our data from least to greatest. We have our median in the middle, and then our lower half, we're going to find the other median. That's going to give us our first quartile. For our upper half, we're going to find its median. We're going to find the third quartile. So now we've divided into quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3, and quartile 4. And then again, the interquartile range here is my third quartile minus my first quartile. Those are our two inside quartiles. And we have 77 at that edge of the inside, and we have 64 at the other edge. So it's 77 minus 64. So our interquartile range, our IQR, is actually 13. So it's a subtraction answer. It's a difference. Again, make sure this is in your notebook, and we're going to go over some examples. Okay, so interquartile range, or IQR problems. Let's look at this problem. It says to find the interquartile range, or IQR, of the data in the dot plot below. Go ahead and pause this video and try it on your own first. Okay, there's two different ways that people would attack this problem. You could just use the dots, or if you're like me and you want to make sure you don't miss anything, you could write down each value. So I have a 43, 3 of the 44s. Let's make sure I don't write that too close to each other. 2 of the 45s, 147, and 2 of the 48s. So that's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So then that way I don't have to get confused with the dots. Here it'll be easier for me to see how I figure out my median. So I'm going to do my marks on the bottom. That way I don't have too many crossing out in my numbers. So 1, 2, 3 cross out in the front. 1, 2, 3 cross out in the back. Let's take one more from each side. So this right here is left over, and that's going to be my median. Okay? In order to figure out my interquartile range, I do need to figure out my other quartiles so that I can figure out the inside quartiles. So I'm going to just look at these two halves now. So now I've divided my information into two halves. So it's like I'm ignoring this stuff and I'm just focusing on the front part now. Take away 1 from each side, and I'm left in the middle here. So here is what's between 44 and 44? That's 44. So that's quartile 1. My median is quartile 2. And then here I have to figure out quartile 3. 1 from each side, 1 from each side, and what's in the middle between 47 and 48 is 47 and a half. That's going to be quartile 3. Okay, so I've divided it up into 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's in the middle. It's not really a part of the piece. If I had to do it with my dots, I would cross things out there, right? But it'll get kind of messy, so that's why I like to write it out horizontally. Now remember, interquartile range is quartile 3 minus quartile 1. So I need those numbers. 47 and a half is quartile 3. Subtract 44, which is quartile 1. And when I do that math, I should get 3 and a half. So that'll be my interquartile range. All right. So again, find the median 2 more times, and then it's your quartile 3 minus quartile 1. Let's try it again with a different problem. All right, I love this because they are giving me cards to kind of sort through it, but I kind of don't like it because the last one gave it to me in order. So first step here is I got to put it in order, and then I'll figure out my interquartile range from there. So let's see, 0, then 1, then the number with 2, 3, these 4s need to be moved back, and 7 goes in front of 7 and a half. So 0, 1 and a half, 2 and a half, 3, 4, 4, 4, 7, and 7 and a half. That's going from least to greatest now. So we already did that. Go ahead and pause the video and try to find the interquartile range on your own. All right, so first things first, I need to figure out my median. I need to divide it in half before I can divide it into quarters. Okay, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2. So I took away 4 from front and back. That leaves me with 4. So this right here is my median. It's also quartile 2. It's the one right in the center. So now I have that as my median. That means this is my first half, and this is my second half. So then I'm going to do the same thing. 1, 2 in the front, and 1, 2 in the back. So this is my median. Ooh, what's between 1.5 and 2.5? I'm going to have to use my mean formula. 1.5 plus 2.5. I'm going to add it together and find their average. That'll tell me my median. 1.5 plus 2.5, if I put into my calculator, is 4. That makes sense because 1 plus 2 is 3, and then these halves make another whole. Okay, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So between 1.5 and 2.5 is 2. That's quartile 1. quartile 1. I'm going to do the same thing here. It's going to be the same thing, 2 in the front, 2 in the back as before. Ooh, between 4 and 7. So I got to add them up and divide by 2. It's going to be 11 divided by 2. Let's see, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 11 divided by 2 must be 5 and a half. 5 and a half plus 5 and a half is 11. So in between here is 5 and a half. That's going to be quartile 3. Hopefully you got that as well. IQR is quartile 3, subtracting quartile 1, because you're trying to figure out what's the range, how spread out is it in the middle. So that's 5 and a half minus 2. 5 and a half minus 2 is 3 and a half. So you should have gotten that as your answer. Okay. So the next one is also asking you that as well. They're always going to be asking you for the interquartile range. That's quartile 3 minus quartile 1. Let me know if you have any questions as you work on these problems, and I'll see you in class.